Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Beyond the Steps. I am Bree Zabrowski, co-founder and CEO of Apollo Performance Wear, here with my fabulous friend and co-host, Melissa McDaniel Grisham. And this is Beyond the Steps. This is a show that we talk about everything from gender equity to nutrition to psychology, racism, sex abuse and prevention, dance medicine and science, and more. Today, we're really excited to talk to Dr. Nancy Burns about the occupational hazards of marching and what we can do for injury risk management. The marching arts is a huge segment of the population, from schools, collegiate, and even into where you get into DCI and all the competitive groups at that level. And it affects so many people. And just like we talk about dancers a lot and other performance athletes, marching arts is no exception. And it might blow people's minds a little bit when they hear that, because I think initially the stigma is that marching artists, how could they be getting injured? But the truth is, repetitive strain, overuse, inflammation, that is a very, very big reality when you're a marching artist. So we're excited to talk to Dr. Burns about that today. And for those that don't know, Melissa, tell everybody about Dr. Nancy Burns, and let's get into it.
We are so excited to have Dr. Burns with us as a first-time guest. We've been doing this for 4 years, so when we get a new first-time guest, we are so super excited, and especially a first-time topic like this. So Dr. Nancy Burns is a board-certified athletic trainer of more than 14 years with a doctorate in health education and health promotion from the University of Alabama. While earning her degree, Dr. Burns acted as the healthcare provider for the university's $1 Million Band and Alta Morea Winter Guard. She also assisted with medical coverage for the 2021 and 2023 Macy's Great American Marching Band, and now serves as a marching health clinician working with high schools and colleges and drum corps across the country, notably the Cadets and Blue Knights Drum Corps. Thank you, Dr. Burns, for being with us today and coming to Beyond the Steps for the very first time.
Of course.
So I know that, I marched, and that's very loose.
Did you?
In high school, because, and this is a great short story. We were the dance team in high school, and they didn't have enough people to do flag line.
There it is. Yeah.
The band director was like, "Hey," they called us letter girls back then, because back in the day you used to have a letter as the dance team.
Oh my gosh!
Go out there. You're gonna be our flag line this year. We were like, what?
Yeah, what is flag?
They made us go through flag training that summer. We were a mess. We had no idea what we were doing. So that's why I say I marched very loosely, because
you're right.
I was just like, we don't know what we're doing. They just sent us out here. But I know that I had no idea that this level of injury prevention management was necessary for marching artists. So what do you think the biggest misconception is when it comes to marching artists and injury risk management?
Sure. Well, I have two, and one is slightly controversial. Okay. The first is music is for everyone, marching is not. Which kind of leads into the next misconception that needs to be addressed, is that marching band performers need to be treated as athletes, as your traditional mainstream athletes. That what they do on a field is very physical and is very taxing on the body. And so your marching band performers in the past, or what is like the old school kind of training for them, is to actually march to get in shape instead of getting in shape first to march. And so my current work with Marching Health is really trying to flip that script, and to get our marching performers physically ready for the physicality of the art.
Mm-hmm. And are you talking about cross training, conditioning, in sort of that off season, as well as throughout the season? I'm sure it looks a little bit different, the regimen, but you're talking about a full program.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. And we do try to, of course, there's any number of calisthenics and body weight exercises, which is what we focus on, just to make it as accessible as possible. But we tailor those programs to match the visuals of the band that we might be working with. So, within the marching world, there are you can pretty much boil down to like there's 3 different types of marching. The first is called a high step, which kind of looks like a standing mountain climber. As they're going, you see this a lot in some of your your older traditional schools. So like University of Michigan, University of Tennessee do it. So does Missouri, University of Missouri. They do kind of a modified high step. You have your roll step, which just looks like a glorified heel toe walk, which is a little bit easier on the joints. And then in some of your drum corps, you'll see a straight leg march where it is the heel toe march, but the knees are locked out straight as they're doing it. So they look more like tin soldiers, right, as they're going along. And so if we know what the marching style is, and we know the goals of the band director as far as the style of show that they want to present, then we will customize our programs and pick the specific calisthenics that will work best for them, right? Pick the specific types of exercises that will aid those bodies to be able to do those skills that are being asked of them.
And I want to say this for our audience, because my world has opened up to this in the biggest way the last couple of years. We were introduced fast out of Shark Tank. We were introduced to Bands of America, and we went and exhibited there. And somebody from the dance world said, you guys need to be in, like, at the Marching Arts Convention. There's one in Indianapolis. And we ended up at BOA Grand Nationals shortly after the show. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, there's like 40,000 people there, and these people are injured all the time, and very similar parallels to dance in that they don't have the supportive footwear options. There's a lot of traditionalist mentality and things like that. And so we went, and my mind was blown at the level of artistry, the athleticism. You just don't know if you're not in that world. And so my brain, now we're sponsoring, Paramount Winter Guard, Santa Clara Vanguard. We had a relationship with that before they unfortunately had to close it down. And Marching Health is our partner. Like, we've really gotten into this space, and it is unbelievable to me the similarity, the overuse that they're seeing, and the struggle to keep them on the field through an entire season. So really excited to connect with you today, Dr. Burns. And I want to jump right into the first segment. So, we talked about it. Oh, and the other thing is these shows change every season. And so, just because they're doing one type of march or one type of program one year, it could totally change. And the needs and the way you approach that, correct me if I'm wrong, can change, right?
No, thank you for bringing that up. Yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah. So what are the common physical injuries that we see the most? You say overuse and repetitive strain, but what specifically are those injuries that we're seeing that are plaguing these lines and these marching companies throughout the season every year?
Sure. So we see a lot of lower extremity injuries. So when we say lower extremity, right, we mean everything from the hip down, which makes sense. They're on their feet. They're doing all of these different types of marching styles, these different types of visuals. Ankle and knee do tend to be the most complaints, the most discomforts, right, tend to be within those 2 joints. We actually see a lot of your tendinitises. So especially in the Achilles, if they are our color guard, so our weapons line, our flag line, and then we see those itises more in the feet, right, in the toes, just because they have to be up on releve, and they're spinning, and they're just, they jump and they land right on the balls of their feet the entire time. So those are really the most common ones. We do see a lot of soft tissue injuries. And by soft tissue, we're referring to things like blisters, your rashes, your insect bites, right? Because they are outside. So that is something that they have to contend with. Especially, when I was in Alabama, like fire ants were a real threat on
I never would have thought of it.
Yeah. So we have your soft tissue, your sprains and strains, specifically lower extremity, rolled ankles, tendonitis in the knee, different things like that.
And also, like, calling attention to, they many times they have to practice, or most times they have to practice outside because they need a space large enough. I mean, these groups are ginormous, and they're, when you talk about doing all of these movements on a field where potentially the surface is not even, there's not a ton of give there, that's not meant for this type of movement over and over and over, that also probably can't help, right?
No, and you bring up a great point, right, about the type of surface. A lot of schools may not have access to a field big enough to accommodate the size of the band, or what fields are available. If this is a high school program, chances are football, right, is going to take priority over those big green spaces. And so they are left to practice on asphalt or on concrete, which just, there's less shock absorption with those surfaces than natural grass. But more than that, especially your blacktops, right? Your blacktop asphalts and your concretes, heat-related illnesses are another one that I should have brought up. Actually could exacerbate the potential for heat-related illnesses, because when the sun is right over that asphalt, that blacktop, soaking in the heat, you get radiant heat, coming down from the sun, but then you also get like the radiant heat coming up from the bottom. So it actually may be hotter on those surfaces than it is on natural grass. Natural grass. Oh, sorry. Please continue.
No. Go ahead. I want to hear the rest.
No, yeah. So there's actually challenges to natural grass that some folks don't think of. We just said fire ants, right, or other types of insects that might live there while they're marching on top of them. But also, how well maintained is the field? I have seen fields that look like pitted, where they have like plots of green grass, and then there's just like dirt in between all of them, which only increases the risk of a rolled ankle, because they're gonna catch their toe right on one of those surfaces, or if there's just holes in the field, because sometimes there are just holes in a field. So you don't think about it, just like you had brought up, but it can be tricky depending on the surface that they are marching on.
Yeah, and that, I'm telling you, shameless plug, that is why we are all up in there with Apollo socks. We're talking to these directors. We're like, put these on their feet, and they're out there for long hours. I mean, it's not just an hour to like a class and then they go home. I mean, it's potentially 10, 12, 14 hours. It's a lot, crammed into a certain time span, and it's a lot of just taxation on the body. But talk about, do you see musculoskeletal injuries because of these repetitive movements? Do you guys see a trend in that?
Yeah, so the most common one that we see is going to be in the calves. So whether it is an overuse injury in the calf muscle itself, or of course down into the Achilles, regardless of the marching type, it's still a step or a bounce on a raised platform, right? They're in a partial releve a lot of times. So that just overtaxes that specific musculature. More than that, it also brings up potential knee injuries or tendonitis in the knee. Because if you have somebody that is just bless their hearts, right, just aren't born with very good alignment in their feet, then some of that force, right, those ground reaction forces may then translate up into the knee. We do see a lot of groin and hamstring, actually, because of how quickly some of these folks need to move on a field, right? Choreography is used, in the dance world. Drill is used in the marching world. It means the same. You have to get from A to B and do some fantastic things with your body while you are getting from A to B. So depending on how fast the drill is might depend on how wide of a step that they have to take. So if you're backwards marching, for example, that actually there's a lot of load on the excuse me, on the hamstring, you know, because you need that muscle to help like pull you backwards. So just like you said, with the length of practice times, if you're out on a field for 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, or it's like a joke, not a joke, you know, but with the colleges that I worked with, you know, the football players will say that the band practices more than they do. So then they might have a 2-3 hour practice, but they're doing 2-3 hour practices a day. Drum corps, right, which is when they're in their spring training, essentially their preseason, yeah, they're out there for cumulatively, right, 9 or 10 hours a day or more in some cases. So it is repetitive stress. It's that over and over and over again. You know, a lot of those issues are going to come, especially those more acute issues where we do see those strains, are going to come like at the end of practice, just because their bodies are tired. And so they're just, instead of maintaining their posture and thinking about their technique, they're just kind of just throwing their bodies into the motion. And that's where those types of injuries can crop up. So it's a whole concert, right, of issues.
Wow. Cool. There's so many factors.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's so many factors that go into it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
my mind blown. And I you know, totally, here I go on my tangent. Dr. Burns' first tangent with BTS. Here we go. I was kind of thrown into understanding the whole breadth of the marching world. My husband, you're down in Florida, so you probably know he was a member of the Marching 100 at Florida A&M University.
Oh wow, yeah.
So I mean, when you combine like full out dance choreography with drill choreography, carrying, I mean, we're talking splits, turns, jumps, like
so athletic. Yeah.
So athletic. Like, I can only imagine you're getting dance injuries, you're getting marching injuries,
Yeah.
I mean, and things like that. Do you find in dealing with and that type of choreography and that type of work is really common in the HBCU, for those historically Black colleges and universities type band program? It's a entertainment extravaganza that includes
it truly is
a whole different thing. Do you find that their injuries are different, or that there's a different level of training that has to go into that?
Yeah, no, so you bring up I mean just a lovely point about HBCUs and you know, and how their style is closer to the entertainment extravaganza, right? Like you said, it is more dance based. You can think of it more like modern dance, right? Where it's body flow, it's body movement, right? It's not necessarily these strict and rigid steps, right? That ballet is. I'm going to be honest with you, when looking into the research, because I am an educator at the same time, there actually haven't been any studies, or at least none that I could find, that just studied HBCU marching bands. You know, marching band and the research tends to get your traditional, right, your college is found in there, but also your military marches as well, because a lot of what they do is march. Granted, they're not playing instruments, but they're still holding body weight while moving. So the research is there for those guys too, but it's just not there. But visually, I think all of us can appreciate that, yeah, what they experience, the physicality of their style is akin to the dance, to the art world. And so you are going to get more acute base injuries, right? When you have to start and stop as fast as they do, those decelerations is what can stress ligaments, especially in the knee, right? Especially in the ankle. But then they are jumping and dancing and doing everything at the same time. You know, and that's true for your traditional marchers, your traditional style. And if you want to know what it's like, or like what it feels like, it taxes the body more to do breath work and to move at the exact same time. So try this at home, right? Sing the Star Spangled Banner while doing jumping jacks at the same time, and you'll just immediately feel just how quickly, how tired the body can get with trying to do both at the same time.
Yeah, I know I couldn't do it. I can barely talk and do different things at the same time. I'm really not going to stand
Yeah.
and play an instrument. Um, so, what role, Dr. Burns, does footwear, improper footwear specifically, play in increasing risk during marching?
So it decreases risk, right? Proper footwear
Mhm.
would decrease our risk. Your feet are your most important asset, right? With when it comes to marching, you are on your feet all day, and
Mhm.
so you want to make sure that you have the type of footwear that is going to be custom to your foot, or that is maybe not custom, may not be the right way to say it, but supports your foot the
Mhm.
way that your foot is just naturally designed, whether you have flat feet or high arches, or you're kind of somewhere in the middle, right? There are different shoes that will match how your body was built. And if you're not wearing the best footwear, we have less support for our joints, and when you have less support, then that means your body has a harder time supporting itself, and then we see these overuse injuries come about. But if you have good footwear, then it means that those ground reaction forces, it's being distributed better and doesn't hit so hard, if you will, up the body, up the kinetic chain. And it's also important from a soft tissue perspective too. I'll never forget it. I had a college, marching band performer who every year she had her lucky band camp shoes, and these were Converses, which
Ah,
the
ruined
which the
you.
design of the Converse, right, hasn't changed for 100 years, right? Like, it is the exact same today as it was when it was first created. And that itty bitty insole, right, that flat insole with the canvas exterior, right, does not support the ankle, does not support the foot. But these were her lucky band shoes, and so she wore them every band camp. And by the end of it, they were duct taped, pinned together. I mean, honestly, on the hair of her chinny chin chin. And so she had shin splints, right?
Mhm.
Which is an injury that I should have brought up earlier. She suffered from shin splints. And I can't tell you how many times we had the conversation about having the proper footwear to match the activity.
Mhm.
Uh, because it was her lucky feet, if her lucky footwear. So it is important, and you don't have to be a healthcare provider to promote that, right? Any of our band directors or our music educators who are listening to this, right, that is one of the easiest ways that you can help your kids take care of themselves, is to take care of their feet first.
I
Mhm.
love it. And I'm going to cap on that too, that like this is, Melissa, to put it into context, is very similar to the issues that we're facing in the dance world. Like, you have that mentality of my lucky dance shoe or my lucky marching shoes. And I've going to spend money on the costume, but maybe the shoes and the socks, like we're talking to a lot of people that aren't even thinking about, have not, previous to having the conversation with us at Apollo, have not even thought about the socks. And you're like,
Right.
well, the shoe can only do so much, but you have to look at that toolbox. So for all the marching artists out there and all the coaches and all the directors that are making decisions for your programs, you really have to equip your artistic athletes with a full toolbox. That means good shoes, Apollo socks. That means
Yep.
the right
Yes.
conditioning programs, the right warm up, the right recovery tools. We're having those same conversations that we had in dance now with these marching bands, where we're like, what are you doing for them in recovery? Do they know to wear their Apollo socks when they get off the field for practice, so that their
Mhm.
bodies recover faster and they can get back out there? But the socks, the shoes, the warm up, the conditioning, it all kind of works together. And they really, like, it has to come from the top down, because otherwise these kids are going to do what they've always done, and they don't
Wear
know
their
any
lucky
different.
band shoes.
Yeah, and they're going to wear their lucky band shoes that are doing absolutely nothing for them. And
Yeah.
one step further than that, kids are, the younger kids they don't understand the long-term impact of what they're doing yet, because they're not in their 40s and they're not feeling the pain that from all the years of overuse, right? So
Yeah.
it's really up to the people that are making the decisions for them and that are costuming and setting the rules for the corps, that they have to set the guidelines on what's expected for these athletes and these artists to take care of their bodies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If you are just now joining us, this is Beyond the Steps. I am Melissa McDaniel Grisham here with my amazing co-host, Bree Zabrowski, and we are talking to Dr. Nancy Burns about what are the occupational hazards of marching and how we can practice injury risk management. It is not too late to watch the rest of this show. We have a lot of great show left. It's also not too late to ask someone to join, to share, to tag, to comment. Let us know what you think. We definitely want to hear what you think, what you want to know about, any questions that you have, and here's some more information from Dr. Burns. So our next question that I have is, how do marching activities potentially lead to overuse injuries, and what are some preventative measures? So I know that you're talking about like doing like these repetitive motions over and over and over and over again. You know, an overuse injury people don't expect. They're like, why is my foot hurting? I didn't do anything, but you know, I didn't.
That's a great
Whenever
point.
you get an injury, people are like, well, what did you do? Well, I don't know. I was walking. like, like when you get old, that's what you say. It's like, what happened to you? I don't know. I went to sleep. Like
Right.
you don't really know what happened. But how do you prevent that when you don't
Yeah, like
know?
what you can't really stop
Yeah.
that from happening. Like that's
Right.
what they do. So what do you have? Like,
Yeah. And that is where preparation is so important. That's where footwear and sockwear is so important. To help that, it is inevitable, right? The repetitive nature of marching, it just is. And the challenge with those repetitive strain injuries is that they are considered chronic conditions, which are a lot tougher to diagnose than your acute injuries, because with your acute injuries, you can state, I tripped and fell. My foot went this way, my knee went that way, and I heard a pop. You're chronic, you don't realize there's a problem until it gets to that critical point where you start to feel it. Or with our marchers and with our color guard, our weapons line, one of the things that they will say is that they don't feel like they can play at a level that they are accustomed to. Right. One day it was this high intensity, full out effort. And then the next day they felt like their body could only provide 80%. And that is when we know, right, that an issue is in play. So prevention, exercising ahead of time is going to be really important. Preparing the body for that physical activity is going to be really important. But more than that, using the right exercises and the right calisthenics that matches the environment. So in the exercise science world and the weightlifting world, there's two different ways to build muscle. The first is with concentric contractions. This is what everybody thinks about when they see somebody doing a bicep curl, right? Where the weight is down by their arm and then they bring it up to their shoulder and they go back down. The muscle is shortening, right? That's where you get that like Popeye looking kind of thing in the middle of the arm. And the other way is eccentrically loading the muscle, where you are trying to stress it out while the muscle is getting longer. So if you think about somebody who is doing calf raises, right? Instead of doing calf raises on a 1-to-1 ratio, right? 1 count up, 1 count down, 1 count up, 1 count down. We would recommend, what Marching Health and some of our programs implement is loading those muscles eccentrically by emphasizing the down, right? 1 count up, 3 counts down, 1 count up, 3 counts down. And so that just trains the muscle differently. You still get the gains, right? You're still going to get the strength out of it. It just trains the muscle to act more like what it needs to do while they're walking backwards, right? While they're marching backwards, while they're slide stepping. So that is the best way that we have found to to recommend our recommendations and to train those who contract with us, who we help.
So how important is cardio in all of that? And like, so right now, right? And we're at the point in the season where everybody's kind of getting ready for spring training. They're doing tryouts, they're finishing tryouts. Maybe they're finalizing who's going to be in, the organization for the performing season, which starts over the summertime for most people. So like right now, what should these artistic athletes be doing to prep for the busy summer tour schedule?
Sure. Short of what we had just talked about, right, is strength training.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing up the cardio. Completely missed that part. Here's what is, if we can just add one more challenge, right, to what these marching artists have to do, is you have two types of cardio systems, right? You have your anaerobic system and your aerobic system. Your aerobic system is your kind of sustained cardio. So think of your marathon athletes, right? Your anaerobic is more of your power. So think of weightlifters, right? Olympic weightlifters, excuse me. Well, both of those systems are used while marching. And that is because the drill is going to flow from a higher speed to a lower speed. For one count of 16, they might be going 180 beats per minute. And then the next count at the crescendo of the song, they might be cruising right at 200. So in order to perform, in order to mimic the performance expectations, that is where the prep needs to come into. So not only do we encourage steady state, running around your band field. I understand nobody likes running, and if you are, bless your hearts.
Right.
But it's a cheap and easy way, right, to work on cardio, but then also work on sprinting. Right, where you jog for a little bit and then you pick up the pace and you run a little bit faster. So we'll say jog for 20 seconds and then go at a faster pace for another 20 seconds. And you just do rounds of that, because it all comes back to mimicking, right? Training your body for what it's about to do is what is going to prevent injuries, mitigate the risk, right, of injuries.
Yeah.
So Dr. Burns, can you talk a little bit about the difference, or is there, because I'm assuming that there is there a difference in the type of training or even the type of injuries that you might see based on what type of instrument you are playing? Like a tuba,
right,
and a snare, or is different than a piccolo. Like I would assume that those are totally different types of things. Do you have to customize programs and even training programs based on what type of instrument you're playing?
Yeah. So again, we'll match the need of our clients, and certainly what their members are experiencing, because it does depend on the show. If they're visuals, if they're for our color guard, our weapons line, right? If it's more heavier dance oriented, right, we'll match that. What we know, what we understand from the research is that there are instrument types that are more susceptible to injuries than others. Mm-hmm. If you are a clarinet player, you're actually the least susceptible, which makes a lot of sense because the instrument is right in front of you. You can kind of maintain an upright posture. And so you don't have to, your body doesn't have to counterbalance, right, the weight of a tenor drum, which might get up to 30 pounds. It doesn't have to counterbalance your trumpets, which is what's really interesting about trumpets and where we see them have injuries, or why they have injuries, more injuries, is because, you have to keep this upright posture, but you have this instrument that's held out in front. Well, the trumpet is actually bell heavy. So you not only do you have to account for the weight of the instrument, but now you have to try to keep the tip of that instrument up, which is then going to tax the upper body a little bit more. Our drummers, our percussionists, we do see a lot more lower back and mid back discomforts. which kind of makes sense because they just have all of that extra weight in front of them. And so their back muscles, right, have to counter that. Their back and their core have to counter that. So it actually does matter what instrument you have. It does matter the weight of the instrument. I'm not going to say that they are predictors, but we can see patterns, right, with injuries and the type of instrument that they are playing.
Yeah, that's so. All this to say, it's extremely complicated when you're talking about getting through a season, prepping for a season. You can see why these organizations are so large. You know, the staff that it takes to get through a marching arts season is insane. And I think that, you know, I want to talk about marching health at the end, and have you explain a little bit more about what you do, and how that works for all the people that are watching, so that if they're not aware, they should be. But if you're just joining, this is Beyond the Steps. We're talking with Dr. Nancy Burns about the occupational hazards of marching and how we can practice injury risk management. There's so much more to it than meets the eye. So we definitely encourage you to go back, watch the episode, like, share, and subscribe on all the platforms at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations. We have one more segment, but definitely go back to the beginning and watch the entire thing. What are the long-term consequences of not prepping for these things if we continue doing what we're doing? And in most cases, people aren't doing enough to prepare their bodies, and we see an incredible amount of injury for these marching artists every season. What are the long-term consequences down the road of untreated marching related injuries?
Sure. So this is the exact same for your traditional mainstream sports. This is the exact same if you are a parent at home, picking up your child or stepping over toys. When an injury occurs, whether it is muscle or ligament or tendon, it is always going to be susceptible to injury again. Okay. And that is because the way that the body heals itself is that the material that it uses to stitch muscles back together, the material that it uses to stitch ligaments back together is not ligament tissue, is not muscle tissue. So it does not act like ligament tissue or muscle tissue. Right. So it just puts the body at a greater risk of re-injury to that site. And so what we see, there is research in the dance world that shows, the younger the dancer is, when they sustain their injury, the greater the risk of their career being them putting them into forced retirement a little bit earlier. So the earlier in life that you sustain an injury, there's always that risk that you're going to sustain it again as you get older. And it is the wear and tear on those muscles, on those joints, that can, and this is a little bit dramatic, but it's true for all of us who are physically active, is that it can make them susceptible to arthritis when they get older. Because there just may not be in the knees, for example, you have your meniscus, right, which is like that pillow-like structure in between the two bones, your shock absorptions, those wear down over time. And our marchers are on their knees, or they're using their knees all the time, right? So that just wears down. And so it could be a natural occurrence of marching. So the risk for the future is we need these athletes, we need these performers to think of themselves like athletes, so they are more likely to take care of themselves early, which makes them less susceptible to injury. And if we can prevent or stave off an injury while they are younger, then it may not come back and be a discomfort, right, in the future. So there's always the risk of that.
Yeah, I want to go and clip this audio and blast it out to every performance artistic athlete that I know or don't know. It's so funny because it's not funny, but I was just watching this thread explode on this, a dance educator community. And, I always think like we've done a lot of educating with Apollo and we've come a long way and we've done a lot of really great work. And we try to celebrate those little wins. And then you see things and conversations in some of these threads and you're like, we have so much more to
What to
do.
do.
And it was this debate about how, well, when in doubt, but you go barefoot for all of your styles. Don't wear socks, don't wear shoes, go barefoot, which is the most damaging, and again, don't fight that fight. We know it's not going to go away, but it was unbelievable. And then to go one step further and say, socks and, shoes they're for older kids. They're for older kids. And we're like, if these kids could just start younger, and this is where I'm curious, are you seeing a mass exodus in that high school age? Because, or at the end of the high school career, because in dance, I know that we see kids, starting to get injured at 11, 12 years old because they're doing things, their bodies, they're dancing more hours and they're performing more hours than their body should at that age. They're doing incredible amounts of overuse, repetitive movements, things like that. We're seeing the same types of injuries, and they're getting injured starting at 11 and 12, which increases the possibility that they're going to get re-injured. And by the time they're in high school, they're like either mentally fried, their bodies, the doctor's saying like, if you don't stop now, you're going to potentially be in pain for the rest of your life. And so they leave. Right. And so is it the same pattern that we're seeing with marching artists? Is it that same thought process that's kind of frustrating?
So with our marching artists, what is different for them than dancers?
They start a little bit older, right?
Yeah, well, they start younger, but there's almost a cutoff age. So they age out of the art. There's no professional company that they can go to, like a dancer can go to and stick with it for a longer period of time. Drum Corps is in the process of and I forget the name of it, and please put in the comments the name of it because I've forgotten here. But they are creating a next level to get your late 20s, your 30s performers back into the art. Because when you age out of Drum Corps, then there's nowhere to go from there. So if our marching artists want to extend their performance career, that is when they have to go the concert performance route, right? Then they go with their symphonies, they go with their orchestras in order to continue playing. But there's no band for 40-year-olds right now.
That window is very small, but it's intense.
It's tight. Yeah.
It's
tight and intense.
They don't start when they're super young, but they can't go, forever and ever. So it's a very intense window that they're just training and doing I don't want to say all the damage, but that's when they're experiencing.
They are exposed. They're exposed to opportunities for damage. Yes.
That's a better way to say it. Yeah. Okay, great. So that gives me an understanding, but I think the bottom line of what I'm saying is the sooner you can start making this all part of your routine and being cognizant of these things and that they do exist and that it's not a myth that you will be in pain later in your life if you don't address it. The earlier we can do that as an industry, the better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. If you are just now joining us, we are wrapping up our episode with Dr. Nancy Burns on what are the occupational hazards of marching and how can we practice injury risk management. But never fear, you can watch this entire episode from the beginning on YouTube at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations. Please do so. It has been a fascinating episode. You talk about aha moments and things I never knew, never thought about. This has just been really, really enlightening. So please watch and share. And there's a lot of translatable things between dance and other sports and things that we've talked about in this episode that might be very interesting to you, even if you are not in the marching arts community. So please share, like, comment, let us know what you think, and make sure that you invite others to watch as well. So I think it's time for homework, Bree.
Let's do it. So, Dr. Burns, you are new to the show, but one of the things we do every single episode is assign our audience a piece of homework, something that's attainable, something they can do between this show and next week's episode to kind of get some progress in either the education or physically something they can do to make progress in the space that we're talking about today. So what is one piece of homework you want to assign our listeners today?
So this is a more essay format is what I would say. If it was genuine homework, I would put it in an essay form. It is to think about how to remember everything from our conversation, over the last several minutes. That to take the marching arts seriously, to think about why it is important to treat these artists as athletes. If we do that, then we start to see the holes in care. They're not getting the same nutritional information that a football team is getting at an elite level, for example. They're not getting the same specialized care when they have to go to a doctor because, an overuse injury has gotten to the point where they can't perform at a level that they are accustomed to. So the homework is to reflect on those similarities so that you can become an advocate for the change that needs to occur among marchers to think about themselves more as athletes, because that is the culture change that a lot of us in the field are working on.
I could not agree more. And I want to even add to that, like, let your world open up, look around you and ask around. Like, I guarantee people that are in this space, and dancers talk to those the marching arts people, and marching arts people talk to dancers. I think you'll find that you have so much more in common than you would ever possibly know. And sometimes it's good to let those worlds collide a little bit and start opening your eyes up to the person next to you and their talents and what they do. Because I think if us as artistic athletes, we can start sharing tips and helping each other, and it becomes a standard then that we're all, like you said, Dr. Burns, taking care of our bodies like the athletes we are. And it can be a beautiful thing. So I love that piece of homework. We're also going to give homework to you. It's the same homework every week. It's to take our STEPS initiative course. This is a 5-part course series that has education and resources on every possible topic that we talk about on Beyond the Steps, from racism, gender and equity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and of course, medicine and science. It is the catalyst for the show. You can go at your own pace. It's completely free, and we provide that to you. Melissa has popped the link up on your screen. You can take that at your own pace again. And we have, coaching staff doing this, parents doing this, children doing this. It is for everybody, because when you know better, you do better. And it is a great way to lay that foundation for yourself. Dr. Burns, we've talked and referenced Marching Health throughout this conversation, and Melissa is going to pop that website up on the screen. That is one of the organizations that you work with, and it's doing fantastic things for the marching industry. So talk a little bit about Marching Health and what you all are doing and how people can access it.
Sure. Well, the best way to access is to go to the website. You can see literally everything that we do and that we offer, not just for high school and college marching bands, but also for your drum corps, your indoors ensembles. We have even exercise material for our dear band directors as well. We really try to get the entire community involved, right, in this culture change that I talked about, to treat their bodies more athletically, to think about their bodies more athletically. And so the whole mission of the business is to prepare those marching artists physically. And so we bring in folks like myself who are healthcare providers or who have worked in the marching world. We come in to these different programs and offer tailored programs for those individuals, and certainly for those companies and whatnot. And it really is about improving their movement skills. Because that is what marching boils down to, right? Is the fluidity of the movement, how quickly they can transition, how well are they using their bodies. Marching is exactly what it is. It's glorified walking, right? Whether it's a high knee or a straight leg, but there are still upper body components that need to be taken into consideration. More than that, it is actually it's a proactive program, but what we focus on when we do a clinic is training up the leadership of the band. And this is where we get into the culture change, right? Because it is not our program. It is not the band director's program. It is their program. So part of our clinic is teaching the exercises and teaching a dynamic warm-up that we do called the MH15. And because it should only take 15 minutes to do this and the workout. We take them through it. We teach them the same cues, right, that we would use if it was us doing it. And then we have them teach it back to us so they can then teach their peers. And so that is the first step, right, in creating change, not within any organization, but certainly within an entire community.
Yeah, and I love what you guys do. Dr. Elliot Cleveland, I've had some conversations with him. He's the owner and founder of Marching Health, and you guys are doing great work. But what an amazing resource for these large organizations. They're so overwhelmed and there's so much to think about and do within a season, that having this team of experts who specialize in getting these artists and athletes ready to take the field for that specific program, that's so valuable. And again, when you talk about the benefits, like keeping feet on the field through a season, it makes it so that you're not having to replace people mid-season. You're not having to, deal with people out because of injuries. You're able to keep those feet on the field and maximize the season for the entire organization. It is absolutely worth it. And we're protecting the amazing athletes that they are, so that they can go and live long and healthy lives pain-free. And what's better than that? So marchinghealth.com. Dr. Nancy Burns, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a fun conversation to have, and we're looking forward to sharing this and getting it out there. And hopefully the marching community sees this and gets excited about it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to all of you who joined us for this show. Please make sure that you share, like, subscribe, comment. You can find the full episode at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations on YouTube. You can also find any information about future shows, as well as all past shows there as well. So please make sure that you follow us and click that subscribe button on YouTube, so you know that when we have new content that comes out. Next week, we will be back with another fantastic episode, and we hope that you'll join us. It's 3:30 Eastern on YouTube at Apollo Performance and at TP Dance Creations, as well as on Facebook at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations. So please, in the meantime, you have your homework, both from Dr. Burns and from us. And until the next time we see you, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. See you next Friday.
Bye.